So how do I teach my daughters or my children to honor their word? So I'll tell you a story. Now, I call this my EFE. I'm going to share with you my experience as a mom of eight, my failures, but also my expertise as somebody who's trained women for more than 2 decades. So take the good, harvest from it. That's what I train all the women, and then see how you can incorporate it in your own life. Because I think there's so much that is missing in our culture today when it comes to basic skill training, which I love the word formation, because we form our skill set. We form who we become by disciplining ourselves. And so one of those things is learning to honor our words. So here's a story about my beautiful Pia. Now, my beautiful Pia is 14 years old, and she's so inspiring to me. She really is. I've worked hard on our relationship. One of my biggest fears before was that I would not have a good relationship with my daughters because I didn't know how to do that because wasn't blessed to have that with my own mother, and she's a great woman. It just wasn't something that it just wasn't something that I had. And so I've worked hard for us to develop a great relationship, studying who she is, reaching into sort of, I would say, deep conversations and knowing when to push, when not to push. And Pia is quite strong. She's very strong-willed, and she's a child that I think, and we did Montessori when my children when she was little. They went to Montessori school, and one of the greatest gift the Montessori teacher told me was that, January, she's so strong-willed. It's like a raging river, which requires you to have literally two massive pillars and have extremely firm boundaries, and you're going to have a very easy teenager. Otherwise, it's going to be really challenging. And so I remember following those, instructions of making sure I really put forth firm boundaries with her, and didn't really know, she was my second child, exactly how to do that, but just kept training and following sort of this rule of boundaries, where to a point where she would go to her room 10 times a day, and it was the boundary look a lot like, when you're ready to join us with appropriate language, please come back. It wasn't that I was withholding something. It was that when you're ready, come join us, because she would push, 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 push. And she was very strong-willed. And I am happy to report that those boundaries really work, because she's an easy teenager. She's very competent, capable, and honestly quite inspiring. But, not perfect. Nobody is. And so we are constantly working on our own formation of our will, our mind. And one of the things that really is very important as a standard in our own home is to become a woman of your word, to become a man of your word. So once upon a time, we were just having, actually very recently, last week, a get together, and it was my 7-year-old's birthday, my Vivi's birthday. And I texted all my four older children that everybody had to be home by 5:30, and everybody kind of, to celebrate Vivi's birthday, because the following day she had a party of 5 girls. So we weren't going to be able to really spend quality time with her. So that was that. We had a great dinner. Everybody contributed to making her feel important. We have an honoring that we do for our birthday. And I'm giving you kind of the whole story, so you just kind of get a window to the reality of what it's like to be a mom of 8, building a business, and training my children really as a priority with my husband. So anyways, back to the story. So we live near my brother, which I am so grateful for. And they just got a new dog. So she's like, Mom, I'll be back by 7:00, 6:30. It's just half an hour. I just want to see the dog. Great. And there was a lot going on. So they left the golf cart with their older brother. And then I look at my clock, because we have a 7:30 rosary time. And they know to do that. That's part of our routine. And I'm asking, I'm like, wait a minute, where's Pia? She's supposed to be home by 7. And there was a lot going on. So we were playing games with the littles. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what just happened? So I called her. Long story short, she comes home. She's like, Mom, I totally forgot. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. And this was probably the second offense in just a short amount of time of her brushing off the reverence of time. Like, you say you'll be back by 7:00, you're not back at 7:01, you're back at 7:00. And so she understands that, but she's as a mom, I know she's still developing the skill to make sure she honors that. So I think this was maybe the second offense that I'm seeing her. And the first time I just said, Pia, when you say you're going to be there at that time, you're going to be there at that time. Otherwise, you're going to suffer. So I quickly came in and I sat her down and I said, Pia, let's have a seat and let's have a conversation about this. She's like, Mom, I'm really sorry. I am really tired. I got to go. So she, number one, didn't want to have a conversation about it. Natural, right? And so one of the things that I train my children also is we need to learn to have hard conversations. That's part of a quality relationship, not avoid it. Rather learn how to do it. We're not angry, we're not upset, but there's accountability. And so I sat her down and then kind of explained to her the importance of reverence of time, the importance of being a man and a woman of your word. And simultaneously, my son also was in the whole conversation because they were there together and they were both not home. And so they quickly, drove back and they knew they were in trouble. My son has learned the skill of saying, if you're saying 10 o'clock, it's not 10:01. So we worked hard on that, but somehow he said, Mom, I didn't know when I had to be home, which is another skill in itself. It's like, you're responsible for your ability to communicate and to take responsibility of knowing when to tell us you're going to come home. That's in itself a skill. You can't negate your responsibility and be like, I didn't know is never an excuse. That's another side note. But anyways, so I explained to her and sold her. This is why mothers really need to learn sales skills. I had to sell her on why it's important to honor our word, why it's a skill set that she needs to master. Otherwise, she's going to suffer in life. And I told her that. I said, if you don't get this right, you're going to suffer in life because people don't trust you. When people don't trust you, you feel lonelier, or you get fired at work and you don't get the job that you want, or you can't build a business or because that's what she wants to do because you can't honor your own commitment of time. What I did was sold her on the importance of being a woman of your word. Secondly, I connected the dots for her and said, this is what's going to happen at work. This is what's going to happen in your friendship. You're not trustworthy. Then it's going to be lonely. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm not happy. Well, you're not happy because you're not trustworthy with your word. And it's those micro details that help you actually become a happier individual. When you're trustworthy, then you're less lonely. People love to be around you because they love people that they can trust. So first thing is I sold her. Second thing is I connected the dots for her. But third thing is that I didn't also just say, okay, Pia, you can go upstairs, right? I had to make sure that I pushed back against her reaction was to run away from the conversation and run away from the challenging encounter, but rather say, no, this is something that we need to discuss. There needs to be a strength in mothers that's going to push back because our children are going to push back. They're not going to want to do the things that I think they ought to do. We need to set a standard and have enough strength. And I think it's probably stamina. And that stamina is going to come from our own life of wholeness, that we have greater capacity, that we're not so tired throughout the day because we're reacting all day long, simply because we are not skilled in managing our mind, that we won't even have the time and energy to say, no, we need to sit down and we need to have a conversation. And it doesn't take away energy. It's just normal. It's just part of a conversation. So anyways, broke that down, to her. And then I said, there's consequence to your actions, right? But that's not my goal. So I'm going to just share with you sort of, I'm sharing with you the compounding skill set that I had to learn and continue to learn, because I don't think you never really master it. But I had to basically harness in that moment to hold my daughter accountable to a higher standard, which is to become a woman of her word. Now, so I texted her, I think, so I'll share this with you because I think it's important that you get the window of what this, just kind of what the conversation is. And a lot of times we just don't know what to say. So here's my text to her, and I can read it to you. So it says, hi, Pia, I'm disappointed in the pattern that you're recently showing of not honoring your word. As your parents, we have an obligation to help you understand the importance of being a woman of your word. At this point, you've shown me lack of care of your behavior, and we need to do something about it. So she's aware that I think I texted this to her maybe prior to her coming back No, it was afterwards because it says 8:30 and she was already back by that time. Besides scripts, my suggestion is you do a PowerPoint presentation of being a woman of your word and honoring your time. We can discuss if you should be grounded or not. However, my goal is not to ground you. I don't think that's a really good punishment, although it could be. I think at certain moments we need to withhold. As I said, my goal is not to ground you, rather to teach you the importance of honoring your word and your commitment. Otherwise, you're going to suffer in life. I love you enough to let you know that this is a lot bigger than you think if you establish this pattern of not honoring your word. I love you so much to know. I love you so much and know that I'm on your side. I expect you to have your presentation before you ask me to do anything. So that was my script at 8:30. And then the next day, or maybe that night, I don't know, this is what she sent me. Okay. So this was after a conversation. So here's the script. I don't know if you can actually see it. So we do scripting in my house. Scripting is a way for me to neurologically retrain their mindset by creating neural connections. So I teach them to rewrite. In the women's school, we have this scripting called WRE3, which is write, recite, repeat, retreat. You write it, recite it, and you repeat it over and over again, and you retreat to process and think about how these scripts actually help you form your layers of discipline. So she already sent it to me, and there's 50 of them, right? That's pretty standard. My children have written 200, some of them have written 1,000, depending on what the fraction is. And then she says she did a presentation already, learning to honor my word. And I just want to honor that because I think she took action right away, which is one of the standards that we have in our house, is that we take action. No, children are not going to take action away. My kids, I fight them to take action right away. But she knew that she was incapable of actually doing anything unless this was finished. So she took action. So anyways, why is it important to honor my word? This is from her. I'm writing here. This is her PowerPoint presentation. I'm just taking this. She took a screenshot of it for me. And I want her to actually do a presentation on it and not just do a PowerPoint. And that's one of the things that she has to do for me. It is very important to stay true to my word because it is my representation of myself. And I need to make sure I represent myself with dignity and truth. And part of that is honoring my word. She's 14. And I know that, I teach women. I know that this is not as easy as a lot of women probably have made it seem for adults because we've never been trained how to do it. So I hear a lot of mothers, I hear a lot of single women who suffer unnecessarily because they didn't know how to honor their own words. So I understand the value that this is something I want to celebrate, as a 14-year-old, the importance of already kind of neurologically wiring, because that's kind of what we're doing, what my goal is. And then she follows, also, people trust you more and people want to be around you more when you are joyful and truthful. So I think that's from a lot of conversations. Now, how to honor my time, which is in her next slide. I need to manage the time I have because I need to make time for my family, friends, and sports. And so I have time to make sure I give accurate times and never skirt the truth, which is a language use. You don't skirt the truth. It's a form of deception. That was sort of the words. And it says, I'm so sorry. Never again make the mistake again. Love, Pia. So the battle is real for the mind, the renewal of our mind. We have to implore every strategy that we can as mothers to give them the basic moral foundation of truth. And that is to honor their word. Because if we don't, then we're skirting deception and lies. And it happens at a very young age. And it happens in our home that we build the foundation of having a moral compass to become a woman of our word. Because what I am seeing right now is that single women don't honor their word, right? I remember before I trained a lot of single women, and it was so common. It's like, yeah, I'll be there. I call it the maybe, right? Sure, I'll be there, but they won't show up because they'll say maybe because they won't commit and honor the commitment. We have a commitment crisis. And even though also we say we're going to do it, but we actually don't because we'll make some kind of deceptive lie and say, oh, I'm just so tired, or, I forgot, or I was late because traffic was bad, even though it was really because we maybe did not honor our time. So what I'm seeing is the lack of skill to honor a word then actually bleeds into different parts of our wholeness arena, our friendships, don't trust us, our relationships. We're not trustworthy when we're not a woman of our word. I mean, the relationship and the importance of being a woman of your word, an intimate relationship is so crucial. Otherwise, we lose our respectability. And it happens at a very young age that they develop a sense of foundation that your word is your contract to yourself. Then it bleeds into the siblings, because then they don't trust each other. And that's one of the things that I have to constantly work and manage, and helping them to develop skills to actually have healthy communication with each other. And part of that is being trustworthy. And then it's going to impact the way she's going to build a business someday, right? Or be a coworker or a boss or whatever she chooses to do. And it impacts the way she mothers someday. If she can't honor her word, then she can't hold a standard to her children also honoring her word. If my children didn't trust that my word mattered, right, then how could they uphold it for themselves? They're going to see the hypocrisy behind me telling them to be a woman of their word, and I'm not being a woman of my word. Now, are there times where, my children, actually my 8-year-old, they're in this phase of justice, right? That's the second development of a plane and of a child's development. And they're very good about saying, Mom, you didn't honor your word. Very, if very rare occasion that I would say, we were going to this park, but I'm not going to be able to do it. I have to say to them, it's not that I'm not honoring my word. It's that we're pivoting the strategy because we ran out of time for whatever reason, the brother or so. Even teaching them that, it's not honoring your word. It's that sometimes you have to recalibrate your plan for the day for maybe valid reasons, and helping them also develop the skill of recalibration while simultaneously helping them develop the skill of honoring their word. There's a lot of compounding skill set to live a happy, fulfilling, and meaningful life. It's not, I think 1, 2, or 10. It's really a compounding, I would say, layers of skills that develop into discipline, habits that help us then show up in every part of our arena so we feel fully alive, which is, I love God's glory is man fully alive. Woman fully alive is not susceptible to manipulation, temptation, or evil. And that's our goal, is that the more our children can actually develop a sense of moral compass and life of virtue, which I define, skill set as just virtues kind of broken down, how to, because sometimes we want our children to say, you want to be a good person, but what does it really mean to be a good person? Because I could tell my child, be a good person, be kind, be generous, but they don't know how to break that down as a skill set, right? Because being kind could very well be being a woman of your word. And it encompasses so much of those tangible skill set that allow us to live a life of virtue and moral compass, and allow us to actually feel good about who we are. Because when a child is incapable of honoring their word, they will be less confident. Why? Because they're less competent. Their confidence comes from competence. The competence of honoring our time actually helps develop a confident child. A lot of the questions that mothers have is how you develop a confident child. Competence. You teach them skill after skill after skill. And for those women out there who want so badly for their children to go to heaven, I'll say, make skill building part of your home life. Make it so important for them to know how to make decisions, to know how to say no, to know how to pivot, because that's the foundation of a life of virtue. If we can't live prudence if we don't know how to say no to ourselves. We can't live temperance if we don't know how to say no to ourselves, to the people around us, how to say no to food, how to just eat whatever we want, whenever we want. We can't have a sense of justice if there's no honesty. And there's micro deceptions, white lies that's happening because we haven't upheld a standard of knowing the skill of honoring our word or saying no to ourselves. Let me just give you an example. So for example, what if I did not teach, Pia, or what if maybe Pia couldn't come home early at 7:30 because she didn't know how to say no to her cousins who said, listen, I really have to honor my word and be home by 7, right? The skill there is being able to say no to herself and say, listen, I've got to be home because that's what I said I was going to do. Simultaneously, the skill of going to her cousins and saying, well, I would love to stay longer, but I have to honor my word and go home. So that's 2 skills. Say no to myself, but then say no to my cousins, which are so amazing girls. And also the ability to communicate it effectively so that it's not like, I got to go, bye. It's not, I have to go because I want to honor my word. Why? Because that also builds their relationship. It's not just got to go, bye. Sorry, I've go. My mom told me at home. They could talk that way. But instead, we help them develop the skill of not just boundary, saying no to ourselves, develop boundary, but communicating boundaries effectively and say, I'd love to stay longer, but I really need to honor my word. Because she also has a relationship she needs to protect. Simultaneously, she needs to work backwards and say, it takes me 5 minutes to go from A to B. Therefore, I need to make sure that I leave, not actually at 7 o'clock, but 6:50, so that I leave room for transition. Transition mean the time to transition between the house to the car to the. So all those things, I mean, did not know all these skill sets. I'm hounding on my children for things that I was never trained and I suffered for in my single years. And so learning now the skill of transitioning, right? Honoring that transition time. So building that routine. And then going back into the skill of ownership of our failure and knowing how to say, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. The skill, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. Pia's really good about that. Actually, she's my child who's very growth mindset, and she'll own up to her mistake and receive feedback really well. So what am I saying is that the skills are crucial to helping them to actually develop quality connections, a quality life, a healthier lifestyle. But here's the beautiful thing is that when she knows how to develop boundaries, right? She knows how to develop boundaries with her, cousins. She knows how to say no to herself. She knows how to communicate and have a script to do it effectively. That translates to her intimate relationship. That translates to her other friendships. That translates to her in school. That also translates to her siblings. So the skill that we're building in every particular part of our arena impacts every part of our arena. And that's what a life of wholeness is. So I tell parents all the time, skill building is the foundation to a virtuous life. And that you can't do God's will unless your will is not formed. If our will, we don't know how to make decisions, if we don't know how to honor our time, if we don't know how to say no, if we don't know how to actually, another thing to think about, if we don't know that our value is unconditional and we're not worried about what people think of us, so we're free to say, you know what, I really have to go because I need to honor my word. If I have a proving and pleasing problem because I don't know how to honor my value as not something that is not dependent on what people think of me, then I'm going to feel bad and worry about what she thinks of me. So I'm not going to say no to them. So I'd rather not be a woman of my word and then not actually maybe communicate effectively because I feel bad or I want to be so loved and accepted because I don't know that my value never changes in spite of what people think of me. Do you see the compounding impact of the skill set that us mothers need to impart to our children to help them uphold a moral and virtuous life that allows them to fight the evil around them, beginning with the evil within them? And it's not this evil kind of capital E, but rather small evil, the temptations to live a lower sense of a lower standard or a lack of a moral compass. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, how skilled are we as mothers to identify the skill set that our children need so that we can actually teach to them? Because we cannot give what we don't have. And what I've given you is a very simple situation that's a lot more complex than we think when we're looking back at all the skill set. I love to think about it as a gymnast. If you've ever seen a gymnast in the Olympics, they make it look so simple, right? That's what gymnastic really is. It's actually making everything look so simple that's so complex. I learned that from my friend Chantal, who was a trained gymnast. And what we're seeing is this beautiful artistry of tumbling and dancing, but the micro discipline necessary to actually balance, to do the jumping, the tumbling, that makes it look so seamless, goes back to the layers of discipline in the quiet that allows her to do the masterpiece when she performs in the Olympics. It's the same thing with us women. The way we show up as mothers, and it looks seamless throughout our day, where we're managing our children, we're making sure our marriage is sacred, that we're valuing our time and our health and our energy and our mental space, that we're honoring our friendship, looks a lot like a whole lot of layers of discipline in the quiet that allows us to live our life like a masterpiece, the way God designed us, that gives us the capacity to fight the evil in the world, the evil that's trying to get into our children's mindset. It requires us to be so focused on our own discipline, to die to our own self, so that we can rise to a new version of ourselves, this birth of a new woman every single day. It's like you go through the death and resurrection every single day of your life, all day and every day, to give birth to a new woman that's better than your old self yesterday, that we compete with no one but ourselves, that we grow in deeper virtue and skill set and awareness of self, and love ourselves so deeply that we honor our value for the sole purpose of a greater capacity to love the people around us. And it goes back to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And loving yourself requires you to what? Know thyself. How do you know yourself? Well, you have to know who you are and who you want to become, right? Not a woman of your word to becoming a woman of your word. So part of our role as mothers, the sacredness of motherhood, is to also honor the sacredness of childhood. The sacredness of childhood is where we cocoon our children and impart the skill set that helps them to actually live a moral, virtuous life. And a lot of times, for those that want so badly for our children to go to heaven and live a faithful life, we impose the faith on rocky soil. What do I mean by that? We teach them, go pray, go love Jesus, go read scripture, which I obviously value. But if they don't know how to manage their routine so that they can get up in the morning to make time for prayer, or they don't know how to do boundaries, or they don't know how to say no to people, or they don't know how to say no to toxic, friendship that inhibits their ability to actually be a woman of faith, then it falls on rocky ground because they lack the skill set, which is literally compounding virtue. I mean, just compounding to build up to a virtuous life that's actually going to allow them to live their faith so beautifully that they become a magnet to all those around them. What I see then is a life of hypocrisy, where our children don't see that our lives are attractive. And when I say attractive, it's not the perfect life, although be perfect as Heavenly Father is perfect actually comes the root word telesia, which means to be whole. Our lives are not whole. And so they're seeing sort of this role model, right, of woman who wants to live a life of faith, but maybe doesn't like who she is or doesn't know who she is. Now, it's not, we're not perfect. Nobody is. I don't even like that word in a sort of secular kind of sense, because I think the word almost insinuates pride. It's this word that comes from being flawless. Look at me, nothing is wrong with me. Rather, a woman who's constantly ascending to a higher version of herself. I love it, the ascension of the woman, to aspire for a life of excellence for the sole purpose of becoming greater contribution to her daughter, to her husband, to her sons, to her family, to her community. How? Because when we live a life of excellence and train ourselves on a daily basis, that is what gives us greater capacity to train the people that we love, such as our daughters. And I fail forward all day long. And that's the truth. You can ask my children. I get upset. I get angry. I raise my voice. I don't have it all figured out, but I don't have a choice but to try to figure out myself and get on my knees, get back into study and become a woman of study and of prayer and of, I would say, reflection, to say, how can I improve who I need to become so that I can actually hold my children to a higher standard, whether it's becoming a woman of my word, honoring my time, whatever skill set, hundreds and hundreds of skills in the women's school that we teach. My point in saying this to you is that this is the work, the interior work of the woman, of the mother, of the wife, of the friend, of a single woman, of a grandmother, is a constant work for the rest of our life. Because the more we become fully alive, aka the more we train ourselves with layers of skill set that allows us to live a life of virtue that actually makes us fully alive, the more we can actually invite our children to also live lives being fully alive. We become the greatest invitation to our children because there's life within us. Therefore, they're inspired. What to do? We inspire life around our children, which means to breathe life, which then gives life in their hearts and makes them want to live a life fully alive. God's glory is man fully alive, woman fully alive. Therefore, if we truly want to fight the evil in the world, beginning with our own homes, then we have to fight and build skill set after skill set and teach our children to grow their own skill set so they can live a life of virtue, so that they can have greater stamina to fight the evil around them. And it sounds complex initially, but it isn't when it becomes a way of being. When training the woman within you becomes a way of being, it becomes a way of life. And that we live our life knowing that every single day we have an opportunity to get on our knees, train ourselves for the sole purpose of giving more of ourselves. And I think it's a simple life. I think it's the harder road, but it's also a more wholesome, more beautiful road. The alternative isn't fun. The alternative is to be in constant reaction. The alternative is to not learn these skill set and have children that are such hot mess because they're incapable of actually disciplining themselves, and their life is a hot mess simply because we have not imparted the training that they needed to actually live a beautiful, meaningful life, aka a moral life. So if you're a woman of faith out there, and if you are not even just a woman of faith, but if you want to live a life based on a moral compass, then we don't have a choice but retrain ourselves with the layers and layers of skill set that helps us to live a life of discipline and virtue so we can become happier as human beings and as women. And I just want to add in here, women, we are guardians and custodians of culture. So if we are untrained warriors, we cannot fight the battle in our culture. So it begins with you and me really armoring up for the battle for such a time as this. And I think it's a beautiful time to be a woman, because we've achieved in the West a level of freedom that gives us a voice in the marketplace to fight those wars. At the same time, we are now seeing that the idea of I can do whatever I want, however I want, this whatever you want model is also not leading to women's greater interior happiness. So we are seeing two radical extremes and saying there's a new woman that's rising from these ashes and say, I have freedom, and my goal is interior freedom for the sole purpose of becoming a pillar in my society. And I think that's where we begin to take responsibility in who we need to become for such a time as this, so we can become who God created us to be and set the world on fire and armor up for the battle so that we can fight the evil around us. It begins with fighting the evil within us. Go forth and conquer, armor up. Our daughters are worth fighting for.